Hello, everyone. This is week 15. I'll be going over approaches to emergency management and public safety. This week, we're going to be talking about public safety and how emergencies and emergency services, emergency management help out the municipal government. The rural EMS and firefighters. They are part of emergency management personnel provide services for the safety of the public that service. This include police, fire, EMS, and emergency management. The safety of the public is a critical part of the local government's service provision. The citizens really want these services because they want to feel protected and safe in their community. And that's a big part of the local government is providing these services to these people. All right. Now, we had some readings this week that hopefully everyone read. We had Chapter 12, Management of Public Safety by Raymond J. Rose, and that's where I'm going to start. I'm going to start going over those first. The first section had to do with the police services. The police are really big because they're basically who keep you safe in the neighborhood, reduce crime, chase criminals away, keep the bad stuff off the streets, everything that you want for your family. And who else provides that for you but the municipal government? Policing pertains to controlling and maintaining the conduct of individuals in society. That's exactly right. You behave because the police enforce the laws around your community. This has been around since the beginning of time. Since the human race started, there's been some form of policing activities in a community, some form of law. Most of the standards you see today in policing started in the 1800s in London by a guy by the name of Sir Robert Peel. He developed a lot of those standards, and throughout time, they just perfected themselves, so to speak. And no agreement politically with the police, so the services they provide change regularly. That means politics really don't deal into what police serve. What the police do doesn't change. It might change how they do it, but what they really do doesn't change. And the policing services, there's two areas they fall under: operations and administrative. Operations has to do with the patrolling, the traffic engineering, traffic enforcement, basically the frontline police that you see walking the beat every day. Those are your operations. And of course, you have the administrative side that deals with support functions like criminal investigation, juvenile delinquency, youth investigations, crime prevention, safety education, and forensics and stuff. That's where the administrative side comes into play. And the biggest thing you see out of this chapter is that this section of this chapter is that patrol division is the major unit that's the force and backbone and the face of police departments. That's who does the day in, day out dirty work and jobs that needed to get done. They're the ones you see out there driving their cop cars, talking to people, stopping crime. They're the face of the police. Then criminal investigation, crime prevention, evidence collection, and ID are some of the support elements seen in the police. Like when there's a severe crime, they call the detectives to find out who did it. Then you have these detectives that go to local schools to talk crime prevention. How do you stop crime? What do you do not to be part of a crime? Things like that. The next section talks about fire services, which is basically in itself, the name says what they do. They handle fires. They put out fires. Their primary responsibility is fire suppression, fire prevention, and fire inspections for the community. What that means is they put fires out, they teach you how to prevent fires, and then they inspect your homes, communities, and businesses to make sure there's no hazards that could cause a fire inspection. And they also handle hazmat issues with the police department and public works department. Like if there was a truck crash that was carrying hazardous materials, those three would coordinate to get that cleaned up. Now on the other side of the fire service is the paramedics who work in the fire service, but they're more of a medical personnel. They're the ones that when you call 911 for someone having a heart attack, paramedics and medics show up first on the scene for field medicine to get you to the hospital so you survive. The fire department typically controls EMS services except in major cities where they're usually controlled by like a medical society or medical community or hospital. EMS Act of 1983 made medics on the streets possible. That act right there made paramedics and medics exist. They provide pre-hospital care when you have an accident and a rescue or get yourself hurt at home. Paramedics have reduced mortality rates greatly since the start in 1983, but it's come at a cost. Another part of this chapter is emergency management and preparedness. Police and fire are the first responders to a disaster, while the emergency management is an intergovernmental dimension that handles a disaster. Police and fire are first on the scene, but emergency management control, they're like the top of the umbrella that controls all the fingers that take care of this disaster. They go through and devise scenarios to help the community be prepared throughout the year. They train for a flooding scenario, wildfire scenario, earthquake scenario, active shooter, bomb placement. All these things they train for so they can be better prepared when and if that real thing ever does happen. But no one ever wants a disaster to happen. But history has proven they do happen. Public safety administrator must be aware of the importance of intergovernmental relationships to handle major disasters. You cannot take care of a disaster by yourself. It takes multiple organizations, multiple agencies, multiple first responders to go through mitigation, rescue, resources, and aftermath to get a disaster controlled. And they can range from anything from mutual aid to budget help. My first question dealing with this material is, how does the city respond to feedback from the public and efficiently handle it, being ethically fair to the civil service employees and citizens? Basically what I'm asking here is, when the city and all these services ask for feedback from the public and the citizens in that community, when they receive all this information, how do they handle it ethically? How do they make it fair to the civil service employees and the citizens so they both can basically come to somewhere in the middle, making this feedback and these suggestions work? I'm interested to see your thoughts and hear your thoughts on this. But anyway, moving on. The next part of the reading material we had and I want to go over is Concerns in Emergency Management. It's a reading by Improving Emergency Services in Rural Areas, a bi-objective covering location model for EMS services. Excuse me. By Chanta, Morag, and McLay. This journal article is basically explaining where problems lie in the rural EMS service and how it differs from urban emergency services. And some of the concerns that you have with emergency management is budget, salaries and benefits of public employees, different types of budgets, performance target, a line item, program, budget plans, budget processes. City Council provides budget, financial projections, and budget implementations yearly, but do they always meet them? Well, if there's something that goes horribly wrong and they expend a bunch of money and all of a sudden the budget's blown, I mean, that projection for that year is going to be off. And they also have to handle aids, new equipment purchases like new ambulances, new oxygen machines, new stretchers, new training gear, gear for the fire department, all those things. And then, of course, the ethical concerns the emergency management deals with day in, day out. And then on top of that, the police deal with drugs. There's been a war on drugs in this country since the 60s. It has increased in crime linked to drugs. Drugs produce street gangs to increase violence. And then gang wars from all the gangs that are fighting over their turf. All these things can lead to problems, and they're out of control. And the public administrator must address these problems to make an effective community. And the changes throughout the year in technology has greatly improved the safety efforts of the modern community in the emergency management area. Records on the computer-aided dispatch, telephones and vehicles, and the 911 system have all been improved through computer technology. Excuse me. All three have increased the productivity of the police and fire service greatly. because you can't outrun a radio. Management of the change must be important. EMS must stay up to date on procedures and trends to be competitive and efficient for the community. They must always seek to develop, always communicate, always have relationships with other emergency management departments and cities to develop better ideas and learn from them. Process in place to prevent failure. Lessons learned scenarios, what to do better next time. And they must have a vision for success over the long period. Rural communities versus urban EMS. This is what I'm talking about with that one journal article. It's difficult for ground ambulances to maintain without proper location of AMBOs at appropriate stations. Rural versus urban. Rural communities have longer times to the ambulance comes to help them because they have a longer distance to travel. To better provide coverage, you have to reduce the geographic disparities in service between different demographics. It means basically you need to build stations with shorter zones, shorter coverage areas, so it reduces response times to those locations. You have to maximize expected coverage while improving rural service. The best way to do this is to minimize the maximum distance between each uncovered zone and its station, while minimizing the number of uncovered rural demand zones and minimizing the number of uncovered demand zones as a whole. Basically what I said, reduce response times. Locating AMBOs is optimal solution, but this can reduce disparities. My second question. How can you increase EMS ambulances to maximize calls answered while minimizing uncovered demand zones without a spike in municipal funds? That's a hard one to answer, because if you want to build more stations cost more money and more funds. But you don't want those uncovered demand zones, because demand zones are where your greatest calls come from. Anyway, I'm interested to see your thoughts on that. It's going to be a hard question to answer ethically and financially. Disaster emergency management. This comes down to the last article that we had to read. Disaster emergency management system in the urban areas by Kapuka. Basically talks about municipal governments must have multifaceted inter-organized relationships producing shared goals to handle disasters when these things happen. You have to communicate with your other resources, organizations, and communities in your area when a disaster happens. That's the only way that's going to be a success. You have to communicate. Emergency management has changed over the past decades with Hurricane Irma, wildfires, Hurricane Katrina, and these lessons learned from these events. The FEMA disaster, how they've improved their response times, how to look at disasters, things like that. Networks among responders and systems and agencies have collaborated to form complex systems to handle these disasters from those lessons learned. At the local level, you see examples of this with relationships and common goals between service departments. Of course, we had a podcast over Hurricane Irma. That's just going over the details of the storm and how communities in Florida responded, what they learned. It's an interesting podcast. Go ahead and listen to it from the disaster. Social media was a big communicator with the EOC in that. And ad hoc things happen that were not in the plan. So I'm saying you got to be prepared for everything. Plan for the worst, hope for the best. Firefighter crews working around the clock to support during and after the hurricane. When these things happen, these services all of a sudden become 24 hours, 7 days a week. Like, I know that's what they worked originally, but seriously, all 3 shifts, 24 hours a day. Takes a lot. My takeaways and thoughts. This was a really good week. Really good, a lot of good material. Really enjoyed studying emergency management. It's a very good area. And after reading and studying this, to be in a local community, the citizens expect a level of civil service that keeps them safe and provides them public services when needed for 24 hours, 7 days a week. Every citizen wants that. They want to be safe. It's hard for local communities in the rural areas to provide that with the EMS services. There needs to be a better way to get ambulance response times down. Local communities have to have an emergency department that is always changing with the times to be up to date on the latest protocols and policies when it comes to disasters. Public safety and the civil are the backbone of any city because that's what keeps it safe and prepared. I'll leave you with that. Please comment on the video.